In a 2020 to 2021 NBA season wherein we all witnessed how unreal the Brooklyn Nets looked like when they were healthy, the Philadelphia 76ers still ended up taking the #1 seed despite the team's #1 option Joel Embiid missing a total of 21 games due to injury. And just when a lot of people gave up on the Milwaukee Bucks title chances mid-season, Giannis and company happened to pull it off in great fashion, all at the expense of the Atlanta Hawks, who you can say were just a Trae Young injury away from making it to the NBA Finals as well. And as always, top 4 seed predictions will just remain predictions because even analysts still can't account for potential injuries, trades, coaching changes, or even simple tactical developments mid-season. And so, with the Chicago Bulls having a major retooling of the roster this summer, would it be actually ridiculous to think that they could finally enter the playoffs again or even grab home court advantage next season? Well, people could contend that Chicago's moves do nothing more than make them a borderline play-in team at best, and in a vacuum, it's also easy to argue that the franchise overpaid and gave up a lot to acquire a 32-year-old guy who can shoot from deep, as well as a young non-all-star playmaker. But in my opinion, the new front office regime had finally made the Bulls look like a dangerous team once again, which shouldn't be surprising at all since adding a 4-time all-star in DeRozan and a young promising shooter/facilitator in Lonzo Ball to a team which already had an emerging superstar in Zach Lavine, an all-star caliber big man in Vucevic, together with other young yet solid pieces should definitely make the team much better. But I think the only question here is how much better can the Bulls really be this time around? So what's good, guys? It's Real Balls here, and today we'll look at why it's very likely for Chicago to become a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference next season. But before we move on, if you happen to enjoy these types of content, please do give the video a thumbs up as it definitely helps the channel a lot. It only takes a second of your time, but it would be much appreciated. So let's get to it. Last season was definitely Zach Lavine's coming out party as he just wrapped up a career year where he averaged more than 27 points on an efficient 50.7% shooting from the field, 42% from deep, and 85% from the line, while also doing it on a highly impressive 63% true shooting mark while also in high usage. Well, I mean, Lavine ranked 17 points per game last season while having the 3rd highest field goal percentage among those top 7 scorers, only behind Joel Embiid and Giannis, and among all players in the league with a usage rate of 30 or higher, Lavine ranked 4th in true shooting percentage, only behind Durant, Steph Curry, and Embiid. So I mean, Lavine didn't only make his first All-Star appearance last season, but he also established himself as one of the most elite, most efficient, and most productive players in the league. While for the past couple of seasons, Lavine has been sort of labeled as an empty stats and a bad team kind of guy, which has been the same narrative used with Devin Booker before, but we basically saw how quickly things can change once you surround those kinds of players with an All-Star or even just some efficient role players. And while it's true that we have yet to see how all the pieces would fit with Billy Donovan's system moving forward, but based on how his style has been in play for the Bulls last season, I'm pretty optimistic that a Ball, Lavine, DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Vucevic starting lineup could have a top 4 team ceiling in the Eastern Conference. But why could that be the case? Well, for sure, it's very challenging to think that anyone is going to have a better offense in the Eastern Conference than a Brooklyn Nets team with 3 All-Stars at full strength. But I don't think we should be surprised at all if the Bulls come pretty close to them next season, at least offensively. Well, the thing is, I think Billy Donovan has kind of done a great job of establishing a pass-heavy and ball movement heavy kind of offense with this team. In fact, the Bulls even ranked 4th in the entire NBA in assist percentage and secondary assists per game, which means the team did share the ball a lot. But despite that, it's still not surprising that Chicago still only ranked 20th in terms of offensive efficiency, particularly because the team still lacked more avenues to create offense and to get open looks most of the time. But next season, those problems should be addressed in a huge way, because last season, Zach Lavine averaged the most assists for the Bulls at 4.9 per game, which is totally expected. But now, when you add 2 reliable playmakers in Lonzo Ball and DeRozan, the game completely changes. I mean, DeRozan averaged 6.9 dimes per game last season, while Ball averaged 5.7. Both guys led their teams in assists, and they would easily have been the best facilitators on last year's Bulls roster. So just imagine how much better next season's team could get in terms of creating open shots and moving the ball when they've just added 2 high-level facilitators in a system which has already established ball movement and ball sharing. And there's also the fact that its new-look Bulls should have much better floor spacing too. Last season, the team ranked in the upper half of the league at number 13 in 3-point shooting efficiency, despite having Lavine, Vucevic, and Markkanen as the only guys to shoot at least 38% from deep on at least 5 attempts per game. While Vucevic and Lavine came off career best seasons from deep, both shooting at least 40%, then this time around you add in someone like Lonzo Ball, who also shot a career best 38% from 3 and an even better 40% in catch and shoot attempts, plus you got another potent starter in Patrick Williams, who also shot 39% from deep and an excellent 42% from the corners despite only attempting less than 2 attempts per game, who should definitely get more open looks with Chicago's new spacing. And this now gives the Bulls at least 3 high volume and high efficiency 3-point shooters in their starting lineup next season in Lavine, Ball, and Vucevic. And if you look at it, the top 5 teams in the East, the Sixers, the Nets, the Bucks, the Knicks, and the Hawks, all ranked in the top 12 of 3-point shooting efficiency in the NBA, which is basically what separated them from the rest of the pack last season. But the Bulls were very close at number 13 despite having limited firepower. And I mean, we've seen the extent of how much regular season success can be predicated on the team's outside shooting, so if the Bulls are able to find the right dynamic between making the right passes and draining open shots, I still think it's very likely that they can simply outscore teams, which should give them a shot at a top 4 seed without a doubt. But I mean, of course, questions about DeMar DeRozan would just keep coming since a lot of people seem to just write off his potential with this Bulls team. Well, for sure, the guy lacks an outside shot, he's only a 25% 3-point shooter, he's only made 19 threes all of last season, and you definitely have to factor that out. But if any, this guy should still work in Bill Donovan's system if they use him creatively enough. I mean, it's not hard to imagine DeRozan having the ball in his hands a lot next season because it just makes a lot of sense. He's a very underrated facilitator who again averaged almost 7 assists per game, who was able to find guys from the pick and roll and was able to kick it out to shooters and locate cutters at a high level despite playing in a team which basically had no other all-stars and who had Patty Mills as their only high-volume, high-efficiency floor spacer. And if you translate DeRozan's game in the Bulls offense, you can basically expect him to run the pick and roll a lot, where he can either create situations for his teammates or where he can create driving opportunities to the rim for himself. I mean, this guy feasted on defenders last season, attempting 7.2 free throws per game and shooting a career-high 88% from the foul line. So he'll basically just create tons of open looks for the Bulls shooters, 4 of whom are on the starting lineup with him. So it's basically good luck to opponents in terms of defending Chicago. And even when it's Vucevic and Lavine's turn to run the pick and roll, you still can't leave DeRozan alone. I mean, you just can't completely abandon a guy who's already hard to guard squared up as it is, who's also very hard to catch and close out since he also has the ability to dribble into a 15-footer in no time. But for sure, it's still from the mid-range where it's going to kill defenses most of the time, which of course won't sit out well with analytics guys. But I mean, if we're going to look at the numbers here, DeRozan was still really efficient on that kind of attack last season as he shot 45% within 10 to 16 feet of the basket, which is where he took most of his shots. And despite his lack of a 3-point attack, he still shot 49.5% from the field, which is a whole point ahead of Bradley Beal's 48.5% clip. And we could ignore DeRozan's mid-range creation during the regular season all we want, but again, we've seen how guys like Devin Booker and Chris Middleton's mid-range attacks proved to be very useful in the physical postseason series. I mean, Booker shot 45.2% from within 10 to 16 feet of the basket, which constituted 22% of his shot output in the NBA Finals, but DeRozan has pretty much been shooting at a similar 45.9% during the entirety of last season with an even higher 67% shot frequency. So just imagine the difference this guy can create in the postseason. But for sure, the questions about Chicago's defense will still be there. But if you look at it, last year's Bulls actually finished as the 12th best defense in the league, and after the All-Star break, that ranking even went up to number 8. Well, for sure, you have to account for the loss of guys like Thaddeus Young or even Daniel Gafford, who both had tremendous impacts on that end for the team. But still, the Bulls will now have Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso, who are both dynamic defenders. Lonzo could disrupt passing lanes, while Caruso can guard offensive initiating guards in the wings from the point of attack, and both guards should be able to do that simultaneously. Then Patrick Williams is also another underrated switchable guy, and while Vucevic is more of a drop coverage type of defender, we already know how useful such kind of big man can be when given good perimeter support. And of course, you also can't overlook the defensive effort that Zach Lavine has shown as of late, which should even get better with less load on the offensive end for him. And with those kinds of things coming into play, who knows how much a top 12 defensive team like the Bulls can still get better. Well, sure, it still won't be easy in the Eastern Conference, and predicting how teams will finish is almost impossible to do given the NBA's randomness, but I think it's still a safe bet to bank on the Nets and Bucks landing at the top 2 spots. Brooklyn still has the most firepower in the league, and they've even added Patty Mills and they've re-signed Blake Griffin for less. The Bucks still pretty much have the same championship core, and though they've lost PJ Tucker, they still be having Dante DiVincenzo back. And to me, Atlanta should still be a safe pick to be a top 3 to 4 seed. They have the same pieces and the momentum from the conference finals, and for sure, having DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish back at full strength should pay off. Well, a lot of people have Miami locked in as a top 4 team, but I don't really know. They've added great pieces, but Kyle Lowry is older now and Jimmy Butler still has his shooting limitations. And I think same goes for Philadelphia. You can say that they should still be a lock to have home court advantage, but the Ben Simmons situation kinda puts them in a weird spot both on and off the court in my opinion, and they also didn't really add a lot in free agency. And so I'm realistically giving the Chicago Bulls the same chance as the Sixers, the Heat, the Knicks, and the Celtics to be a top 4 seed in the East if you factor things like roster continuity and new additions all into play. But for sure, Billy Donovan would still need to figure out how guys like Lauri Markkanen Markkanen, Coby White, Troy Brown Jr., Marko Simonovic, or Tony Bradley would fit into the rotation to make things work. But with the Bulls defense having the potential to realistically improve, and with the offense having an almost sure shot to become top 10, there's definitely a world wherein the Chicago team can surprise a lot of people next season if they somehow get enough stops to allow their offense to take control. And for a team that has 3 fringe all-stars and a young emerging superstar who's just about to enter his prime, I think that goal shouldn't be considered a long shot at this point. So where do you guys rank the Chicago Bulls in the Eastern Conference coming into next season? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section below. Again, this is Rero Balls, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.